Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So, Clash Bash was literally last weekend, and that's kind of what brought this video up. You've already seen the title, you know what this video is about, but let me tell you how we got here. So, I'm doing my thing at Clash Bash, and Palmetto State Armory is there. We actually filmed with PSA back at the NRA show when it was here in Texas, and you know, Ben showed us all kinds of new variants they're coming out with, and one thing I thought was interesting was they were cloning not only a Chinese variant, but an old underfolder bayonet variant. Most people know that as like an AKS 762x39. Some people would call that the Type 56 underfolder bayonet. Basically, let's just call it a Type 56 with the underfolder bayonet, the spiker bayonet. And PSA's even calling this thing the spiker. I'm pretty sure like that's what, if you look under the SKU, it's literally called the spiker AK. Anyway, very interesting choice to clone that. So the timing couldn't have been better because one of you awesome viewers actually sent us a gun that you wanted us to review. You said, hey man, you never do Chinese AKs on the channel. I'm gonna have one of my homies get you one for my personal collection. Don't break it, but shoot the piss out of it, do whatever you want. So today on the channel, we have an AKS 762x39, better known as the Type 56. And yes, this one has the spiker bayonet. So the timing couldn't have been better because so many people are talking about the PSA Type 56 that I'm like, oh yeah, I've got one of those right now in for review. So let's go ahead and knock this video out real quick. So in today's video, we're gonna do a lot. Talk about some of the differences between this and like what a lot of us are used to, like an AKM. We're gonna shoot it, tell you what it's like. It's bone stock. Everything on this gun is bone stock. And every now and again, it's kind of neat to go back to basics and shoot an AK the way it came out of the box. To better appreciate why rifle is fine, why people say that all the time, because AKs are fine the way they come. But, you know, you could always upgrade them. This was a breath of fresh air, man. This showed me why AKs, the way they come, is awesome. And they've been, you know, they've been like this since the 80s. So let's get into the history a little bit about Chinese AKs in this country. If you want a deeper dive, you got to go to Misha Ko's channel and watch one of his videos on it. But we'll talk briefly about that. And then we'll take this thing to the range and we'll shoot the piss out of it, which is what we like to do around here. So let's get into that now. The short story is in the 80s, Chinese AK started to flood the country. We saw everything from the Polytechs, which is what this is. Some of you have heard Polytech Legend, the very rare, very collectible milled Chi-Com AKs. Of course, all of the Chinese SKSs are flooding in the country, which you probably recognize looks very similar to the spiker bayonet that you see on this gun. You would have seen that on Chinese SKSs. So we have the Polytechs coming in. We have the Norinkos coming in. We have the very early imports, the very rare Clayco Chi-Com AKs, which is how we got the name for this channel. These things were everywhere. There are a butt ton of Chinese AKs in this country. And back in the 80s, anyone that was around in those days that was into guns would tell you Chinese AKs were kind of thought of to be kind of crappy. No one really appreciated them, not like they do today. A good pre-ban AK such as this fetches a lot of money, especially if you have like don't even get me started. There's a huge rabbit hole of Chinese AK collectors. Like you got to have the box, you got to have the chrome follower mags, as we have here. And you got to have the wrapper that it came in, you got to have the oil bottle, the sling, everything, and they ask retarded money for them, just like a ton of money. And that goes to a whole new level when you get into like Polytech Legends, like the milled stuff. But these old AKS 762s and the Type 56S's from the early 90s and late 80s, certainly the pre-bans, command a ton of money, which is why you never really see anyone shoot the crap out of them or modify them. But You know, so that's that. As you know, we lost Chinese AK importation in like 1995, but while we had them, They flooded the country with Chinese AKs. There are a ton of them here. So mid-90s comes, we lose all the Chinese importation. You know, we had a bunch of like the Mac 90s during the assault weapons ban that are like heavily neutered. Those guns were treated like absolute trash. Like, you know how people like treated Mosin Nagants for the longest time, like straight up garbage rods? Ban era compliant Mac 90s were not treated much better than that. They really were bastardized like crazy. Like you'll see a ton of super Bubba Mac 90s from the early 90s, and it's just kind of a shame because they have a lot of the same bones from these really cool, really nice old school pre-ban Chi-Com AKs. A lot of the stuff is the same. And even Jim Fuller back in the day would say we were just buying Mac 90s. We would totally do our thing to them, and you know, there's a lot of RD builds back when Jim Fuller was still there on Mac 90s because the bones of the AK are really good. It's a good gun to build on because you can pick them up for cheap. So this is what's known as an AKS 762 by 39 by Polytech. You're going to hear me say Type 56 all the time. That's basically what this is. This was lent to us by a very cool viewer. Thank you for that. And you got to let this dude know down in the comments. Yo, this is not an easy gun to find, nor is it a cheap gun to pick up. The fact that he let us do this and shoot it as much as we did today is really freaking cool. We may have actually used that bayonet a lot today too, my man, so sorry about that, but it's still nice. We don't have any extra scratches, it's okay. Chinese AKs are super interesting. They kind of did their own thing, a lot like how the Yugos, or Yugo pattern AKs, Serbian AKs, don't really follow like that Russian AKM pattern. The Chinese did a lot of things different. What's interesting about Chinese AKs, probably the most interesting thing in my opinion, is how they really kind of copied like the old Russian Type 3 milled front ends. So like from the handguard forward, this is very Type 3-esque. You have a very thick contour barrel. The gas block and sling loop, very similar to a Type 3 and kind of like a Yugo pattern AK2. The front sight post is hooded. That's kind of their own thing. They're really the only ones that did that. And of course you can see this whole piece, the front sight and this sleeve, this is all one piece that holds your bayonet and your bayonet lug. This all is slid onto the barrel and populated. It's all one piece. There are Type 56s out there that don't have the underfolder spiker. These can be installed. They're out there. There's still like old spiker front ends, like it's still in the Polytech wrapping that you could put like on a Mac 90 or an old 56S. Totally could be done. Thick barrel, sort of a Type 3 front end. Even the lower handguard has the ferrule like old Type 3s. A lot like Yugo pattern AKs have this metal ferrule so that your lower handguard can actually fit snug into the lower receiver. AKMs don't do that at all. It's just wood straight into the receiver. And of course you can see there the lower handguard is notched for the bayonet, just a big groove. The finish is blued. Other than Yugos, the Chinese are really the only ones that did that, which is why these things are kind of prone to rusting. You'll find a lot of Chinese AKs out there that have really bad pitting, really bad rusting. These guns you kind of have to stay on top of because the finish is not super durable. It's a beautiful finish. They look super cool. Doesn't hold up well, especially with oily hands touching it over all these decades. While it was quiet, I would take 2 minutes and just show you differences between a Chi-Com and an AKM. Starting from the front, you'll notice they're both 14x1 left-hand thread. They both have the 45 angle brakes. You have a non-hooded front sight post, and all Chinese AKs, whether they're Mac 90s or whatever, will have the hooded front sight post. Obviously, some of these came with spiker bayonets, like on your Type 56 SKSs. Very similar. Both have cleaning rods. You'll notice the sling on the Norinco is kind of like a Yugo. It wraps around the barrel, pokes out on the other side, has a little bit of movement to it, and the gas block is a little bit different. AKM's, your sling loop is on your lower handguard retainer. So it's a big difference. You'll notice the barrel on Chinese AKs is a bit thicker. It's going to be hard to see on camera, but you'll just have to take my word for it. The wood on Chinese AKs is slightly different, not super compatible with AKM furniture. That's why it's very hard to find Chinese wood. They have ferrules on the wood a lot like Yugo pattern AKs and like old Type 3s. The Chinese did a lot like the old Type 3 milled guns, even on their stamped variants. So the smooth dust covers like the Type 3s, The front end is basically like a Type 3, and of course they have ferrules on the wood, a lot like a Type 3. Moving on back, the bolt on these was in the white. Of course, on a lot of your other imports, it's either blued or it's phosphated or paint over park or something. You won't find many AKMs coming in the white. That's another thing that like Yugos like to do a lot. These barrels are chrome lined. They would have been factory, both of them. The receiver has a few differences. Stamped, we do have mag dimples. The safety stop, slightly larger than an AKM safety stop. The safety has a physically shorter throw, as you can see there. AKM's quite a bit more. Grips should be interchangeable. Trigger packs are interchangeable. These had the old blued triggers. They're actually highly sought after. They're really nice. The mag release, there's not a whole lot going on that's different there. The stock, you'll notice AKM's pretty standard. You guys are pretty used to that, but on Chi-Com stocks, they have a slight downward cant to them compared to AKM's. And that's just how they did them. You have trapdoors in the back of both butt stocks for cleaning kits. On the other side, you'll notice no optics rail. I don't believe any of them came with optic rails. A lot of AKMs did. A lot of AKMs didn't as well. Sight blocks, virtually the same. Not much going on there as far as differences go. But all in all, quite a bit different. You'll notice the trunnion looks very Type 3. The trunnion on an AK is sunken in right here. Again, I'm no expert, but there are substantial differences between Chi-Com AKs and AKMs. I wish we had a Yugo on here to show you how much the Yugos actually have in common with the Chi-Com AKs. Pretty neat, huh? Pretty. There's certain AKs that remind me that rifle is fine. It is kind of cool to have an AK exactly out of the box the way it came, even with the chrome follower mag that this Polytech would have been sold with. Very rare flatback Chinese mags. Would have come with a Polytech, and it's kind of cool taking this gun exactly how it came out of the box and shooting it without modifying it. It's got 14x1 threads, but we left the 45-degree muzzle brake on there. We didn't change anything, and I will tell you, these Chi-Com triggers, the old ones, they're called blued triggers. Some of the components kind of look purple, some of the components kind of look gold. These are considered to be some of the best triggers to ever be in an AK, ever imported. These are really nice triggers. I would compare them to like modern day Zastava triggers. Whatever they're putting in those current M70s is nice. These are just as nice, if not better. I get so jaded to AKs with all the aftermarket support with Picatinny rails and red dots and different stock options and US palm grits, ALG triggers, tunable gas. You kind of forget why people always say rifle is fine, because a nice AK like this sucker is absolutely fine. You should never change anything on this. It just does everything well. We didn't have a single malfunction at the range today either. We shot the balls off of it, and we tried to only use flatback Chinese mags. I got a whole stack of them, so I thought it was only right for us to keep using Chi-Com mags. Standard Romanian mag has a spine. Chinese mag looks very similar, does not have the spine. That's the biggest difference there. And sometimes the Chinese base plates will say made in China on the back. Flatback steel mags, most people would say, are kind of their favorite steel mags because they're thinner, they're easier to grip. You don't have the sharp spine in the rear. They go in and out of mag holsters a bit better. So Chinese steel mags are awesome. If you do see one of these at a gun shop buried in like a pile of Romanian mags, pick these things out first and try to get them cheap. They are awesome steel mags. Another thing I noticed right out of the box with this thing was how smooth the action was. It reminds me of like a really nice, well-worn milled receiver AK. I don't know how they did it, but this thing, like, it is just butter. And I think it's always been that way. A lot of people say that these older Chi-Coms have super smooth actions, and after shooting it today, the action is wicked smooth. I was pretty blown away. So the badass trigger, coupled with a lighter recoil impulse than my Romy AK that's bone stock, and a smooth action, made for a pretty cool shooter. Like, I was just dying to take this thing to a match and like shoot it as is. Yeah, man, Chinese AKs, they slap pretty hard, dude. A lot of people at the range were kind of cool with it. I could tell some people that aren't that into AKs would look at this and think it's kind of boring, maybe too old school, like too antiquated. A lot of guys are so stuck on the new modern AKs, the alpha clones. But this is the tits, dude. These guns are honestly pretty sick. It's got me on the hunt for like an old Mac 90, something I can convert, because these are pretty damn sick. So I was happy to kick it old school. I was happy to shoot this gun the way it was. I can honestly tell you that they got these things right, even back when they were coming in the 80s. These things are awesome. And you will see a lot of the old like Somali pirate pictures that you'll see where these dudes have like super crusty AKs. A lot of them are Spiker Type 56s. They are literally everywhere. All different kinds of conflicts. They're just very prevalent. Anyway, I think it's kind of cool that PSA is cloning one of these things. I'd like to see other companies clone them too. I think it's about time that we stopped really just focusing on 100 series AKs, beating that dead horse, man. Like, it'd be cool to see other stuff get cloned. I'm happy that someone cloned this. So, you know, it would be cool to get one of those new PSA spikers and like post sample it and do a meltdown on it. If anyone from PSA is watching, we need to make that happen. That'd be pretty cool. I appreciate you watching, and I definitely appreciate you. You know who you are, that let us borrow this thing for all of you guys to watch. Had a ton of fun shooting it at the range today and filming it. Don't forget, go by Third Pin Threads, best way to support the channel. Go follow us on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're all over those places. We have a new channel sponsor that I think I can announce here in the next couple of weeks. I'm kind of excited about that. You guys will know soon. And we'll see you next time. So this happens sometimes.